Our topic of discussion is Cleft research in Africa. And I just want to hand over to my co-moderator, Dr. Ifiaro, to greet the audience and the panelists. Over to you, Dr. Ifiaro.
Okay, great. Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Afiharo Michael, a plastic surgeon in Nigeria, and I bring you greetings from Nigeria. I thank all panelists for being here. I thank Smile Train for putting yet another fantastic event together. I'm sure everyone is going to have a great time this morning. Thank you, Dr. Oben.
We will start by reading the speaker profiles, and we have, as I said, we have a team of 4 panelists. We have we have Miss Nana Akua Osundu. We have Barbara Delagay, and we have Professor Butali and Dr. Tom Osundua. And I will ask Dr. Ifiaro to get the first 2 profiles to you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Dr. Oben. Nicole, could you please enable me to share my screen? I see I'm being disabled. So I could share in a minute, please. Okay, great, thank you. There we go. Yes. So Oben, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can see your screen very clearly. Yes.
Yeah, so go on.
Miss Nana Aku Osuwo is a speech and language therapist living and working in Ghana. Miss Nana trained in the United Kingdom before returning to Ghana to partner with the audiologist to run a private practice as a speech and hearing center, which is called SHC. And she started a charity which is called Awahatu, which provides speech and language therapy to children with communications disability. SHC is partner with SmileTrain, who sponsors the former to provide speech therapy for free to Cleft clients in Ghana. SHC has organized speech therapy for individuals and groups after Cleft repair. Ms. Nana has attended and presented at several Cleft conferences over the years. She is a trainer for Cleft speech therapy and provided some training for SmileTrain. Ms. Nana Akua has also been involved in the development of the profession in Ghana, including the implementation of a University of Ghana MSc training program, and is currently the program coordinator. Her interest covers a wide range in her field: Cleft interventions and lack of effective collaboration amongst local Cleft practitioners, adults with repaired clefts and speech therapy. She also has interest in hearing loss and the development of literacy, as well as the need for the development of some local and cultural sensitive language norms to support the speech language therapy assessment protocols in Ghana. Next. Our second panelist is Dr. Osundua Tom, who is a senior lecturer and consultant, oral and maxillofacial surgeon with the University of Nairobi. As a consultant and a oral and maxillofacial surgeon chair at Getrick, he's a consultant and a chairman of MAC, or management or MAC chair at Gertrude Children's Hospital, Nairobi. He is currently pursuing his PhD on molecular medicine, ITROMET program. He has also authored The Cleft Lip and Palate Surgery, a guidebook that has been adopted by SmileTrain to advance cleft surgery training across Africa. Dr. Osundua is an African Medical Advisory Council member at the SmileTrain board. Over to you, Dr. Ifiaro.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to present the two other eminent panelists. Uh, I have had the pleasure of meeting Barbara Delagay. When she visited Nigeria. Barbara earned her BSc in genetics and biochemistry and a MSc and PhD in food and nutrition science from the University of Bordeaux, France. She also holds an MSc in nutrition for global health from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine in the United Kingdom. She has a strong background in nutrition research with an emphasis on nutrition data collection, interpretation, and reporting. She worked in research in France, in the United States, and United Kingdom, exploring the biological effects of micronutrients and dietary factors in the promotion of health and the prevention of chronic conditions like cancer. Barbara has been working with SmileTrain since 2018. The fourth panelist is Professor Butali. He is a professor at the College of Dentistry, University of Iowa. He graduated as a dentist from the College of Medicine, University of Lagos in 2000 and obtained his PhD in genetics and epidemiology in 2010 before proceeding for his postdoctoral training in craniofacial genetics at the University of Iowa. His primary research focus is on genetics, genomics, and epidemiology of orofacial clefts in the African population and translation of knowledge gains to other populations with the goal of identifying potential etiologic pathways that will inform strategies for prevention. His productivity is evidenced by over 60 publications in peer-reviewed journals and over 100 abstracts presented at national and international meetings. Professor Butali has received many national and international awards. These awards include the X01 and R01 grants from the NIH, Dental Scientist Career Development Award by the NIDCR in 2012, and he is the first dentist to receive the Harold Amos Scholar Award, which was exclusively for medical doctors for 25 years. So we can see SmileTrain has brought eminent scholars to do justice to this topic. We do wish to apologize. The flyer did advertise 5 panelists. The 5th was to be Dr. Dati, an anesthesiologist. He is unavoidably absent because he has to attend to an emergency. So we would have these 4 panelists, and should any of our attendees have prepared a question for an anesthesiologist, please do still feel free to ask. If any of the panelists can attend to that question, they would. Otherwise, the question will be sent to Dr. Dati via email and you will get your response. Thank you.
Now, we will ask our Dr. Ifearo to continue and give us the rules of engagement, because we'll have 3 sets of questions. We have a first general question, then we have individual questions, and then we will now have questions from the audience. Please, the audience, you have the chat room to make your comments. You have the question and answer to put your questions. We as moderators, we are there standing by to pick your questions and bring to the specialist. Over to you, Dr. Ifearo.
Thank you, Dr. Oben. So we are going to start with a general question that all the panelists are going to respond to. And then we will give each panelist a question tailored to their specialty. All the panelists are expected to respond within 3 minutes. We would appreciate that. That will give us enough time to accommodate questions from the audience. These are scholars, and I know they would like to speak at length, but we are constrained with time, and so we cannot afford really more than 3 minutes for each question. Thank you.
In our first general question, we want to pose this question to the panelists. Again, our topic of discussion is cleft research in Africa. In almost every field of research investigating clefts, genetics, feeding, surgical techniques, dentistry, orthodontics, speech, etc., Africa is behind as far as cleft research is concerned. Now, to the panelists, what do you think are some of the reasons that can explain why Africa is lacking behind? Miss Nana.
Okay. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And hello, everybody. I think one of the reasons can be traced to our colonial past and our colonial history. Research I see as added value, and unfortunately in many other areas of different African countries, products do not have that kind of added value. And when the colonials first came, they took the products, they took it out, they add value to it in their respective countries. And then that's how it has carried on. And I think this has not changed much. It's not only in Cleft that you would find that we are backward or we are well behind in relation to other HICs. I think in nearly all areas, you would find that this is what is happening. And I think it's something that our current leaders in these African countries need to sit up and look back and realize that this is part, adding value to healthcare will involve research. And unfortunately, this has not been part of our practice over the years. And so training for people in these areas have only recently begun in very few countries in Africa anyway. So I think that much of it can be traced to our history. In fact, just for this presentation, I was looking online for budgets for research budgets for various countries. I could find research budgets, full amounts easily online for countries like Australia, UK, and others. But for most of the African countries, it was very difficult for me to actually be able to identify what has been put aside as research budgets. So I don't think that it is something that is only for Cleft. I think it's something that cuts across most areas in Africa. It's something that our leaders need to sit up and take note. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Dr. Osunduwa, you have the floor now. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Fierro. Thank you, Dr. Oben and Smile Train, for this forum. My answer to that is structured into 5 main components. And I'll just break down the components in order to probably delve a bit deeper into them. Part of the challenges that Africa faces with regard to research is on resources. The other is capacity. The other is strategy. The other is recognition. And finally, culture. I think it is common knowledge that Africa at any one time is dealing with several emergency situations, be it diseases, be it wars, and so on. And so the appositioning of resources for cleft lip and palate research is pushed to the backseat. And that can be looked also in other aspects. Because of lack of resources generally in many countries, there's the lack of institutional infrastructure. So you don't have good institutions that can be able to conduct research, but there's also the lack of individual funding for research. And so resources plays a very big role. When we go to capacity, you find that Africa has fewer than the rest of the world in terms of individuals who have specialized to do research. And by this, I mean not just somebody being a surgeon, being an anesthetist, being a nutritionist, but is somebody a nutritionist, and are they also qualified to do research? Have they been given the requisite knowledge to be able to conduct research in nutrition? So that component seems to be lacking, and probably Smile Train has had the chance and is trying to build capacity to that effect. Strategy. A good comparison is the Eurocleft. Africa doesn't have a strategy. If you look at Eurocleft in Europe, that's a clear strategy that looks at what needs to be implemented in the future within a particular time period. I think we lack strategy. I think we don't recognize ourselves in recognition. We as Africans, when we go to sit in the world table, we don't have a face. We come in behind several others, and I think we lack esteem in terms of research and recognition. And then culture, publish or perish. We still don't have that culture and reward system that works towards publishing. And so encouraging African researchers to move on or soldier on. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
everyone.
Dr. Sunduwa. Barbara, yes, please.
So thank you very much. So I feel like I'm going to say with other words what Ms. Nana.
That was fantastic.
Yes, was Dr. also said. I agree with Ms. Nana that Cleft research is maybe not more affected than other areas of research in Africa. And I agree with Dr. Usundwa that what's lacking is this enabling environment for research. And as he said, it's about good governance, it's about setting priorities, priorities set that by African stakeholders, of course, infrastructures and the trained human resources that he mentioned, stable sources of funding, but also I want to say this capacity to share research fundings and to translate research findings into practice. Because when it comes to nutrition, for example, there's a lot of evidence-based recommendations at the international level that have been adopted at the country level in Africa, and they have not been put in practice by many of SMITRAN partners. Now, just to specifically talk about Cleft research, I have not conducted a mapping of the current Cleft research that is going on in Africa, or even just among partners, though I think that would be worth doing. But I would guess that the research conducted is skewed towards the interest of those who are more able to conduct research. And I mean, I'm not saying that this research that is conducted is not fundamental. I'm just saying that those who are more likely to conduct research are surgeons or maybe dentists or orthodontists, and less likely nutritionists or speech therapists, for example. So what I'm trying to say here is that we also need, when it comes to research in Africa, to have a multidisciplinary approach when we define the needs and when we define priorities. And the last part is more about nutrition research. I don't think there is such a thing as Cleft nutrition research. I say at every opportunity I'm given that a child with a cleft is a child, and therefore these children with a cleft, they should benefit from the best infant and child feeding practice as their peers. And I think that nutrition research that is conducted in African settings, even with international fundings and of course without the inclusiveness that we would want, they are still likely to support prevention and treatment problems in children with cleft. However, there are feeding and nutrition challenges specific to the settings and related to the presence of a cleft in an infant and child that are not addressed because they are not acknowledged anywhere in nutrition research agendas. So there is, again, I think, a need for a cleft research community that would identify needs, including specific nutrition needs, and set an agenda of cleft research priorities. That's it.
I guess I have to go next. So I think, first of all, I think I should thank SMITRAN, the organizers, Dr. Oben and Dr. Afiaro for moderating this. We've had a wonderful interaction so far. I also want to acknowledge what my co-panelists have said. I think they've said it all, but maybe I should just try and see if I can tweak out a little bit of information from what they've said in addition to what I had in mind. I think research in Africa is not immune from the political structure, leadership, and instability on the African continent. You can't just keep research aside. There's a lot going on. And if we don't get this right, it's going to affect every facet of activities within the continent. So research inclusive, that's one. Two, I think Dr. Sundwa and Barbara talked about multidisciplinary and collaboration. So it is extremely important. There is no research question that requires just one expertise, except you don't want to do a good job. And unfortunately, in Africa, we've all been carrying our individual country flags. We've not been able to carry out Pan-African studies. And when we even attempt to do that, we do that within language barriers. You want to see the Anglophone on one side, the Francophone on the other side, forgetting that there are knowledge that can be gained by doing cross-cultural research. And you can then apply the findings to improve health across the continent. So we've created problems in addition to the problems that were created by the structure of leadership and maybe as an offshoot of colonization, according to what Nana said. However, those were the problems we've seen. How do we then move forward? I think going forward, I think we should take responsibilities as Cleft caregivers. I don't want us to say Cleft researchers. I want us to first say Cleft caregivers, people that are concerned. Then research questions come from the interest of individuals. Then those individuals can now spur others to come into a group, collaborate and respond to those questions. So that involves strategy as well. And finally, nobody's going to give you funding if they don't know what you can do. And the only way you can show what you can do is to demonstrate productivity. Whether you go to international conferences to present your data or you publish for others to read about you, then that way someone can put money on what you're going to do in future. You cannot get money from a promise. You have to get money from evidence-based productivity. So I think we should start putting ourselves out there. It's called salesmanship in science, science communication. Share what you have, no matter how small, even if it's your case report. That tells someone somewhere that you're interested in something, and then that builds collaboration. So because of time, I'll leave it there, and then I will continue if the opportunity arises again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Butali. That was a wonderful presentation. You see, because it's salesmanship, we must be able to sell what we have. It's only when we sell what we have in conferences and in publications that someone can become interested to collaborate with us, and someone can become interested in funding us. Now, we are going to move on to very specific questions. Again, once more, please, you have Q&A from the audiences. Please send your questions into Q&A and direct them to very specific panelists, who specialize in that field. Also, you can send your questions by email, and we will continue to respond to those questions. Now, let's go to the second phase, which is specific questions to our specialists. Now, I will take the very first question, and it's directed to Barbara. Barbara, this question is for you. You being aware of some of the problems plaguing research in Africa, from your experience, what guidelines do you give a Cleft team daring to start or already carrying out some sort of nutritional research in Africa?
Thank you for this very difficult question. So, like Dr. Osundwa said, and like I said also, conducting research requires an enabling environment and also some specific knowledge on, for example, how to design a study or on ethical practices. So a very simplistic and biased solution would be to link up with me, so I could try to help with various aspects of their plan. And I want to say that this is a possible solution, especially in the current context, where SMITRAIN is pushing to see partners adopt, the standard of care in nutrition, and is encouraging also partners to seek help to overcome the barriers when it comes to nutrition care. So, because at the moment I'm an advisor for SMITRAIN, I think this is a good moment to link up with me. But I understand that obviously this is not a sustainable solution. I don't know if the solution would be to seek at the country level, but I will just repeat again what I said, is the need for a Cleft community to come together to identify the needs in nutrition research and set an agenda. And when it comes to nutrition, I believe that many priorities in research, they align with global and national research priorities, but not all. So I'm afraid that Cleft practitioners, they have to engage with policymakers to be heard, because educating and motivating policymakers is essential to ensure awareness and inclusiveness. At least I say that when it comes to nutrition. On that particular topic, I also want to mention that SMITRAIN is hoping to join the Scaling Up Nutrition movement. So I don't know if the other panelists or the moderators or people in the audience have heard of this movement, but basically it's a consortium of stakeholders at international and country level that work together to improve nutrition. And the idea here is to be there and have a voice every time a decision is taken, including when needs are defined and research priorities are defined. So again, here the idea is to have a foot in the door, to not only not being forgotten, but to be systematically acknowledged and included. That's okay. So I'm happy to hear also the contribution of other panelists on that difficult question. I think Dr. Oben is... Dr. Michael?
Thank you, Barbara. Yeah, we do have a lot to do in terms of engaging the polity, moving forward with research in Cleft. Professor Butali, could you please take your question? And it goes thus: what can we do to support Cleft research in Africa, considering the limited infrastructure? I mean, we were talking about funding and limited infrastructure and opportunities, and how can we leverage on Cleft research to train the next generation of researchers in Africa?
Thank you very much.
Did you get the question, sir?
Yeah, two questions in one, right? Yeah, so thank you very much. Yes,
please, and still within the 3-minute time.
I'll try and see how I can put that together. Well, I think,
thank you.
Picking up on what I said before, we recognize that the infrastructure is limited, the opportunities are limited, but we have people, and when you have people, there's a lot you can do, and when you have people with ideas, there's a lot you can do. So what can we do with what we have? And I'll give you a simple example. We had access to the SMITRAIN data some 5 years ago, and we did a retrospective analysis, and that was published. And that then led to some other opportunities where we were able to use the data to train someone in data analysis, where we partnered with a biostatistician. And that's, there was no funding for that, but the data was available and people were available. So can you start doing things that are obvious? Then when you publish, you are visible. Now, the good thing about publishing and then being visible is that there is now funding from international organizations that are focused on the African continent, the NIH inclusive, the Medical Research Council in the UK inclusive, And they fund through also the Gates Foundation, and they do this through the African Academy of Science. And that comes with a call, but there's no call specific for cleft, but there are calls for pediatric cases. So can we make a case for funding for cleft? But how do we make that case if we don't even publish? They don't know that there's a need. Because when you publish, most of your research ends up with another question. And those questions, they spur interest. So that's one. The other way we can then sustain research and continue research is mentorship. And the only way you can do that is, I always tell people, when there is an academic outcome, you tend to have productivity in research. So we have trainees, we have students, we have residents, we have young faculty. The incentive for them will be that terminal degree, but for the team to be the research outcome. So to sustain research and to continue building research, you need to mentor the next generation using the available resources, including data. And once you're able to do that, you show them the rudiments of getting data, writing abstracts. People don't know the importance of abstracts. When you write an abstract, you submit to present at international meetings. You've created multiple opportunities for yourself as the person presenting and for your group. Even if it's poster presentation, people are going to come there to ask you questions. And I'll quickly share one simple example. I presented an abstract, a poster presentation in 2012 in San Jose, and a lady from Virginia came to meet me and we were talking. She said she was interested. And that was how we built capacity. And 5 people from my research collaborators in Nigeria were able to go to Virginia just because she came to my poster. And so many people have similar experiences that they can share. And from there, people started getting funding and their relationships that are even beyond what I even know about my first contact. So these are the opportunities we can create for ourselves. So when is a terminal degree, the student or the resident is deeply involved, there's productivity, and the mentor then uses the opportunity to visualize or to put out the interest of their group. So I think putting all this together, it still comes back to us. Funding will only come when you show what you are able to do. Otherwise, nobody's going to say, hey, you look good, you're going to be able to do research, I give you $1 million. It doesn't happen that way. So I hope I've been able to do justice to that. Otherwise, if I have an opportunity again, I'll shed some more light. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Butali. We hear you loud and clear. No productivity, no funding. Mentorship is going to result in sustenance, and collaboration is integral. Okay, so Ms. Nana Owusu, here's your question. It's somewhat in 2 parts. I'm going to try to collapse it because we already seem to be running out of time. Considering the diversity of languages in Africa, how do you think that speech language therapists or pathologists can develop a tool that can be used for outcomes research in Africa, which can be reproducible across the countries in Africa?
Okay. So yes, I'll collapse the two questions that you asked there. I think one of the things we need are credible programs, speech and language therapy programs in Africa. So we have programs with Africans teaching with our textbooks and material from Africa. I think it's very important that we are able to have that, and then have through that, as the last speaker said, be able to present evidence-based practice information. So we have information that is based on evidence, collaborating with each other, collaborating with other speech and language therapists across the continent, within our countries and across the continent. Because I think it's very important. One of the things I feel that we don't do well enough is collaborating within our countries. And we may collaborate with others outside, but not within. So collaborating within and collecting information and evidence that we will be able to use. This might take time because I think not many countries in Africa have programs running at the moment. And it's important that I said credible programs because there are programs where different disciplines or different professionals are trying to set up speech and language therapy programs, and they do not have speech and language therapists working as lecturers in the program. So it's important that we have programs in which we have speech and language therapists who are heads or the clinical leads of those programs. And I think to get that information, that kind of research outcomes, which will help to maybe reproduce outcomes in the field, we need that collaborative working, researching broad language areas, having those large longitudinal samples across our respective countries, systematic research, so that we'll be able to get evidence or information that we will share, we'll be able to share with each other. I think the experiments will have to be systematic and a scientific base, so that we are able to share that information and we are able to reproduce it. So I believe that working collaboratively, having a credible program set up, being able to work collaboratively, setting up and collecting information across from within and across the continent, looking at broad languages that are spoken broadly in the respective countries. We'll be able to gather the information we need to be able to set up tools that we can use to support our own systems and our own programs.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Nana. With your passion for this, I can see you already championing this collaborative effort among the speech language therapists and pathologists, and we look forward to the outcomes. Dr. Oben, you have a question for Dr. Sundwa?
Yes, Dr. Sundwa, thank you so much for the first part of the question, your response you gave. Now, the question is this. You post, let me go back. I'm sorry. Can you take the questions from there, Dr. Fiaro, if you have it there with you?
Okay. All right. I think I have it now. So, Dr. Sundwa, we see that you are poised to study molecular medicine. And so the question is, how can Africa benefit from molecular medicine in Cleft research? Please share with us. Dr. Sundwa, are you with?
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Fiero. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you. Now, the benefit of molecular medicine in Cleft research is enormous. I will look at a stratified etiology kind of model for Cleft. When you look at all clefts, they basically, in terms of etiology, fall under one group. You'll find the big group of clefts are the non-syndromic, and these have an admixture of both genetic and environmental factors as the etiology. Then the smaller two other components are those that weigh in more towards environmental factors. And then you have the other spectra are those that weigh in towards the genetic factors. Now let us try and look at these three components very quickly in order to digest and answer your question. Let's look at clefts that come in with environmental factors. For instance, clefts associated with folic acid deficiency. Clefts associated with folic acid deficiency normally may be related to certain genes. For instance, you get a gene called the methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase gene that is involved in the folic acid cycle. And so studies can be done that relate this gene to particular environmental factors. So gene-environmental interaction. So that's an example of an important aspect in the molecular medicine that brings into that aspect. Now, if you go to the other spectrum and you look at clefts that have a genetic weighting, an example of these clefts, like those associated with aberrations, an example is Down syndrome. You can look at those associated with craniosynostosis, and an example is Treacher-Collins. You can look at Apert syndrome and the rest. You'll find that there are specific genes involved in those circumstances. And molecular medicine comes to interrogate these genes that are involved. And some of the genes are like, that are involved with clefting are like the fibroblast growth factor genes, 1, 2, 3, those with craniosynostosis. So molecular medicine gives you that ability to interrogate those specifics. Then you have the big non-syndromic group in the middle here. And there's so much that has not been found out in the non-syndromic group. And so molecular medicine is trying to advance the frontiers in terms of trying to get novel genes that have not been discovered yet, trying to get genetic environmental aspects that still have not been discovered. So I think molecular medicine has a lot of relevance in cleft research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Sundua. It's another wide area of cleft research, and yeah, identifying the problems at the molecular level. So we thank really all the panelists for their responses to these questions. We are going to proceed now to take questions from the chat room, Q&A. Dr. Oben, do you have any other questions on your end?
Yes, there is a question from Dr.
What I can see here.
There is a question from Dr. Adeyemi, and he is asking, my question is for Professor Aziz Butali. I am aware you have many published papers on cleft genetics in Nigeria and Africa. Can you highlight what impact your research findings and recommendations had on prevention and management of clefts in Africa?
Thank you very much for that question. So I'll take it from I'll take it from where Dr. Sundua left it to be able to answer that question. So for you to get to prevention, discovery is the foundation of prevention. So what we've tried to do is to ask the question, what are the variants in the human genome that increase the risk for clefting? And since 2011, when we published our first paper, we're able to show that in some genes that have been reported in Europeans and Asians, there are actually risk factors or risk variants in Nigerians. And building on that and collaborating with others, we were now able to publish the first genome-wide studies to identify new cleft candidate genes. So we've identified 2 new genes never been previously reported. And this was published in 2019. And the reason why I'm saying this is because one of those genes was shown to play a role in the metabolism of alcohol, SALT2A1. And there is what we call gene-environment interaction. So it is possible that that gene regulates alcohol metabolism. And if there's a variant in that gene, it could lead to an increase in clefting. Now, on the immediate impact of our research, we've been able to identify families previously not known to be Van der Voort syndrome families. Van der Voort is the most common clefting syndrome. About 2% of all clefts is Van der Voort. And so many families that we've screened, we've been able to make that diagnosis, went back to the clinicians, and they've advised mothers. And we know that if you have a child with the syndrome, the risk of having a second child with another syndrome increases from 5 to about 12%. So by counseling the mothers that your next pregnancy, there's a risk of having a child with cleft, because Van der Voort is autosomal dominant. That means if you have the variant, you are likely to have the disease. So if that woman is pregnant, she's prepared. And if she's able to get prenatal diagnosis screening, to screen for that variant. And if it shows that that child has the variant, that means the child is likely to have Van der Voort syndrome. So it's now up to the mother to want to keep the pregnancy or not. If she's going to keep it, that means there will be counseling involved so that there will be some expectations. So that's an immediate impact of our research. We've done that in Nigeria successfully, Ghana, and most recently in South Africa, where a family with 3 kids with cleft palate only never knew was Van der Voort's until we screened that family. And my PhD student in South Africa was able to collect the clinical data, and we did this molecular screen in my lab, and we were able to show that that family is likely a Van der Voort family. However, the gene that carried the variant is not the popular gene for Van der Voort's. The popular gene for Van der Voort is IRF6, but the gene that carried the variant is called GRHL3, grainy headlight 3 gene. And the grainy headlight 3 gene variant accounts for 5% of Van der Voort. So we're able to establish that. And my PhD student is going to go back to counsel that family because they already have 3 kids with cleft palate only and it's Van der Voort syndrome. So those are the immediate impact. But the long-term impact requires us to understand the full genetics, and that does not come immediately. It comes over a period of research. As the technology improves and expands, we're also pushing our science. And our group has been able to conduct the first whole genome sequencing. That means we're able to look at every single nucleotide in the human genome, and we'll be able to make some discoveries. I can't talk about them here because this is not the forum for that. But the data from that discovery is going to be written up by one of my grad students, my PhD students, and published for the field to see what we've been able to do. So those are our contributions to cleft prevention and cleft care. So for care is counseling majorly. For prevention, we're working on the discovery and we're making very good progress. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Butali, for that response. I have a question that came in from Duncan Musasizi, and it's for Ms. Nana Owusu. Duncan, I believe, is a speech language pathologist, and he says majority of people trained in other disciplines apart from surgery are non-specialists. For example, training a nutritionist or a physiotherapist to do speech language therapists might not produce fruits in research because these other professionals do not have enough knowledge to bring out the juice of whatever they need to research on. Ms. Nana, what do you think?
Okay, I think we've also had issues with other professions, like OTs or PCOs applying to do speech and language therapy. And at UDI, in our program, we are very, very cautious of people who are professionals in one field and want to
Uh-oh, is it me or Ms. Nana's network? I can't hear her.
Therapy. We think that in Ghana at the moment, it is not the right time for us to have someone who's trained as a physio. We need the physios anyway. We need people to have the full physio.
All right, the network is unstable on her end. Okay, so she could respond to that when she comes on. There's a question for Barbara. Dr. Oben, have you seen it?
Hello?
Hello, yes. There's this question
Can
for
you pick
Barbara.
the questions for Barbara? Yeah, can you pick it if you have it there?
Yes. Barbara, you have a question here. Alaye Garango asks, what are the basic means to conduct a search for malnutrition on cleft lip and palate?
That's not a tiny topic. I think it's, I mean, I don't know what exactly.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Miss Nana is back.
Yeah, Ms. Nella, you will come on just as soon as Barbara is done with responding to her question. She had begun responding.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would say
Okay.
it's
Okay.
not just
All
about
right.
it's not just about conducting research on malnutrition, for example. I think one has to start with a research question. In fact, to start with something, you need to have a question. You have a problem, you have a question, and you will then think about what kind of data do I need to answer these questions. So when it comes to malnutrition, for example, I've had the chance to ask the question, what is the nutritional status of children with cleft at the time of primary surgery using the SMITRAIN database? And so I use SMITRAIN clinical database to try to answer that question. But from there, then we agree that there was a lot of data that we did not have to actually properly answer that question. However, from the findings we had, then we could move on to say, what do we need to improve these numbers? Because I found that about a third of the children at the time of surgery worldwide, and including in Africa, were underweight at the time of primary surgery. So I don't know if any other panelist wants to have a go at that question. No? Dr. Butali, Dr. Osundwa? No?
Thank you. While they're thinking, maybe Nana can complete her thoughts on her question. Thank you, Barbara. So, Nana, you may go ahead, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm just keeping my video off for a moment. Saying that we are very cautious about accepting people, admitting people on the program who are physios or OTs, because, as he said, loyalties may come to question when they are. I don't know whether he means people training on a full program, say we have 2-year program, or he's talking about physios learning to be speech therapist assistants when it comes to cleft work, because that is okay, that's acceptable. So you can have physios or others who are trained to support children who have had their repair and support them with their speech therapy. So we can have other professions can be trained in that so that they help individuals who have had surgery. So I don't think that is a problem. But if you're training as a full-time speech and language therapist, when you've already trained maybe 2 years or 4 years as a physio, then I think sometimes we are cautious about how we might be able to use both to assist your country, to help the country. So we are very cautious about accepting people to do that, because we think we need more speech and language therapists. We need more physios as well. We need therapists, we need OTs. So it's important that we train whole speech and language therapists, and for specific cleft work, that's okay to be able to train other people to support that work. So that's how I look at it. So I don't know whether the physio is talking about is training to be to support cleft work or training as a full-time speech and language therapist.
So it appears, thank you very much, Ms. Nana. It appears he was actually trying to say they don't know how to do research. So how can they really contribute to cleft research in Africa if they don't know how to do research?
I don't know about, but I mean, there will be speech and language therapists who may not have a very strong research background. I mean, I didn't. I had a very strong clinical background. And one of the things that we have been doing, or been trying to do, is to link up with others more like in the UK, and some of them are speech and language therapists who are now just research therapists, and all they do is that they collaborate with clinicians and come up with situations that clinicians are finding challenging or interesting in those areas. So I don't think that is the fact. The point that he's a physio makes him less knowledgeable about research than any other, because there are speech and language therapists and others in other disciplines who do not have a very strong research background either. And yeah, and we need that. Dr. Pierre, does that answer what you think was asked? Am I gone off again?
Yeah, you've been cutting it in and out really, but I think we got what you're saying. Okay, I think we are pretty much out of time. We may have just enough time for a wrap up. Hello.
I'm sorry.
Dr. Oben, are you
Hello,
there?
Dr. Fiaro. Yes, I'm right there. I have one last question for Dr. Osundua, being a surgeon. And I want to ask you this question. I'll just put it into very briefly. Do you think the way surgeons will keep statistics and data has a bearing to our poor research culture? That's number one. Two, secondly, as it relates to your specialty, what will you consider as a structured Cleft research program for surgeons in particular? Dr. Osundua.
Thank you very much, Dr. Oben. The second question, which I can remember vividly now, is that as a structured Cleft research program is one that looks at the candidate who is going through the program and looks at the need. What I mean is that a program should be able to convert somebody who has the basic principles in surgery into a surgeon who is able to do basic cleft lip and palate surgery. We have had, I've had the privilege of putting down a program for the University of Nairobi, which is a fellowship program, and that is yet to pick up, but there's our West African program now. And these programs are meant to pick on people who have had the basic knowledge in surgery and utilize that basic knowledge to guide them through the principles. And so the program has several components, but there are assumptions on basic knowledge in general surgery. And that program normally will make you be able to safely do cleft lip and palate research. I mean, not research, but surgery. And at the same time, safety means outcomes, because like for cleft lip surgery, the outcomes are very, very clear. That once you repair a lip, somebody looks at it. One, your cupid's bow should be horizontal. Two, your incisions should be hidden in natural landmarks. You should have adequate lip length. So everything in terms of what we look as guidelines is factual and very measurable. So in other words, after going through the program, you should be able to give measurable results. And those are in terms of both lip and palate. Number two, you should be a safe surgeon. And there are very clear programs like the West African. I think you have started the program. My program, we have done it. And right now we are training we are doing an informal training, but the formal training is coming through probably in a while. I think, Dr. Oben, you can go through the first question so that I answer it again.
Now, the first question is just very briefly before I go to Professor Butali to give me to tell us some last words. Now, do you think the way surgeons carry on their business in terms of data statistics and keeping of information has a bearing to their poor surgical research ability.
Yes, I've understood it now. Absolutely, that's true.
Yes.
And that is why I'm calling for structured research. That means that the surgeon should be enabled. When you have a structured program, it means that even when the surgeon is entering data, that data where he's writing his notes is a database. And so you're helping the surgeon be able to have these things captured. I agree that surgeons, and not only surgeons, all other disciplines tend to concentrate on their core, what their core is. And that is why a structured program for research tends to look into those and find ways in which you enable all these specialties. Thank you very much, Dr. Oben.
Now, Professor Butali, do you think data keeping, as far as Cleft program is concerned, the way we keep our data information has a bearing on our poor research culture?
Absolutely, sir. Absolutely. And in fact, that was also one of the focus of discussion during the Smart Train Research and Advisory, Research and Innovation Advisory Council meeting, which I'm privileged to be a member of. The way we collect our data, the way we keep our data has a bearing on our research. And that goes to what Barbara was talking about. Sometimes you have a question and you want to use the data and you realize that the data is insufficient. But the good thing about that is it allows you to then plan a prospective study to correct that missing data point. So again, it's a give and take. Sometimes it's only when you ask a question that you know something is missing. It doesn't just come at you. So, but we should improve our data collection and our data entry. And that also speaks to the reason why we're beginning to establish Cleft research registries in Africa, and kudos to NK and a group for facilitating that through Smart Train funding. So I believe it's going to go beyond Nigeria and going to cut across Africa, and we all benefit from good data collection and good data entry for research. Thank you.
Thank you so much, our great panelists, and we'll hand over to my co-moderator, who will just give us a brief summary of what we've been talking about.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Oben. We do have one last question that has been sitting in the Q&A for a bit, and it's to anyone, and perhaps the answers are going to be yes and no. All the attendees, we do appreciate your staying with us all this while. The email addresses of all the panelists are in the chat room, and you can communicate with them after this session. So this question says, do we have funded research to evaluate or give feedback on Smile Train sponsorship in Nigeria and Africa? It's by Dr. Tokunbo Adeyemi. So anyone is perhaps yes or no question, and then perhaps further clarification can be made via email to the panelists. So anyone of the panelists can answer. Is there funded research right now?
If I may, there
yes,
will
please.
be. The plans are, there's actually discussion around that, and I know NK is on this call as well. There will be, and that's what they're trying to put together, to have a grant mechanism to be able for clinicians and researchers on the continent to evaluate clinical outcomes over the years, so they can give feedback not just to Smart Train, but to even the patients and the families through published works. So there is a mechanism coming, so people should be prepared to apply. It's going to be a grant mechanism so that you can ask those questions. So let's get ready for that opportunity.
Thank you, Professor Butali. Does anyone else want to have a last second word on this? Barbara, Nana Wusu, no. Okay, so thank you so much, our wonderful panelists, for this exciting time, informative period, stimulating period, I will say. We thank Smart Train, always been doing such a great job in bringing eminent scholars together. Cleft research is actually also very close to my heart, and it's germane right now in Africa. We need to move forward. Anybody doing Cleft care must be interested in the outcomes in order to improve what what we are doing, you know, and then also contribute to the larger scientific society. We have, in summary, noted we do need to collaborate more. I know Smart Train is putting together that mechanism for partners across countries, within countries, to collaborate. Professor Butali has indicated that there is going to be perhaps funding for research going forward. And I believe calls for submission of proposals will come when all that is tidied up, perhaps by the Medical Advisory Committee of the Smart Train. It has been reiterated that we must collaborate. We must publish if we must get more funding. We must show what we're doing if we will get funding, and we should all be interested in research. Yes, I thank our attendees for coming. I do apologize, and we are sincerely sorry we don't have any more time. It's a pretty big topic. I know some people would have had more questions to ask, but you could ask these questions directly to the panelists. Their emails have been shared. We appreciate your coming. Thank you, my co-moderator, Dr. Oben, for doing such a great job.